Hey, what's up, everybody? Tonight we're here with our co-host Dolly Miller-Brennan and cast for Senate Andrew Castanuela, running for Senate in 2012. I just found out. I thought it was this year. Um, but yeah, Cass is running for Senate of the great state of Texas, Republican style. And tonight, we also have the Indian from the Village People. No, I'm just kidding about that one. But tonight we'll be talking about the gays. yeah, I'm kind of kidding, but for real, it's a serious topic. The don't ask, don't tell policy pertaining to gays in the military. We're going to be talking about that tonight. And being this is kind of a sensitive issue with some people, I'm going to be clowning around a little bit, but it is a serious topic. If anybody wants to call in with their opinions on this, either side of the opinion is fine. We're not going to make fun of you or anything. Well, maybe a little bit, but we're not going to harsh on you or anything like that. but yeah, I mean, my personal opinion on the subject. If you keep your business in your bedroom, you really ain't got nothing to worry about. But with the military, I just did a little bit of research on this, and I found out that at one point you couldn't be in the military if you were if you were gay because they actually asked, and then if you lied on the application, they found out you were gay, you got discharged. Did not know that. So when the don't ask, don't tell policy, correct me if I'm wrong about any of this, Cass, I'm sure you will. The don't ask, don't tell policy, that came around about 92 when Bill Clinton was running for office and actually did get elected. And he was trying to get gays in the military. That was one of his campaign platforms. Then what had happened was nobody was going for that. And I kind of disagreed with it, honestly, not because I had any problem with gays being in the military, but I didn't feel like it should be made a public worldwide issue with, gays being in the military, because the whole world was paying attention to that. And I was like, no, if you want to be in the military and you're gay, that's fine. But, we don't need to publicize it like that. I'm sure there's been gays in the military since there was a military, it just didn't say anything, So I really don't understand what the big deal is anyway, because, look at the Navy. You've heard the joke about the submarines, 200 men go out, 100 couples come back. Come on. So, this is a serious subject that needs to be discussed, and with Cass running for Senate, and, he's going to be voting on this stuff when he gets in there, and it's going to pertain to you, and not just you people in Texas, but everybody here in America, and also it's going to pertain to the world. So we really want to know what Cass thinks about this, and Dolly Miller-Brennan is going to handle the interview, and I'm going to run the board. I'm going to basically be quiet besides cracking jokes. No, I'm not going to do that well. Are you there? What's that?
I hope you do jump in.
Yeah. Oh no, I said except for cracking jokes, but I was kidding. I'm just going to be playing comments, sound bites. So yeah, if you guys want to go ahead and get started, Dolly, if you'd like to introduce Mr. Castanuela. I can finally say your name, Cass. Have you noticed
He's
that?
doing very well too with the mic.
Thank you very much, sir. Okay.
He's not a Texas
Dolly,
boy. That's a big accomplishment.
Okay, Dolly, I'll let you get started.
Okay, well, I think as people, hopefully our listeners know that Andrew Castanuela, or Cass, is running for Senate in 2012. This is such an important issue because it looks now as if the White House has given up on the House, saying the Republicans are going to take the House, but they feel that the Democrats are going to hold on to the Senate by 2 seats. So as Mr. Obama continues to focus more on the Senate, he seems to just drop the House race of focusing on the Senate to put Cass into the Senate in 2012 is extremely important, specifically if there's only a 2-seat lead. So we do want to do everything we can to help put Andrew there. And Cass, you had mentioned, on the gays don't ask, don't tell policy, and Mike had mentioned my Uncle Jesse was gay. He was in World War II. He's very effeminate looking, tattooed from one end of his body to the other. And he fought in World War II in the Army and won all kinds of medals of bravery. But that doesn't mean that everybody should do it. I'm not saying that. But a federal judge in Riverside, California, last month struck down the military's don't ask, don't tell policy. And perhaps you can tell us how a federal judge in Riverside, California, can have the authority to tell the United States government you have to allow gays to enlist.
Well, that's a very good point, Dolly, to be honest with you. When we look at the United States military, we got to understand the administration. And has its own separate judicial system, its own separate of what we call manuals for court martial. We also got the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It was created both by Congress, especially in 1950 under the Truman administration. And basically what that is, those are the guidelines where those people who serve in the United States military service are going to be governed by an extra set of standards and rules and regulations that are not, that would be punishable for acts that would not be punishable of those who are civilian. For example, let's just take freedom of speech, for instance. Somebody in the military cannot openly say, hey, look, disgrace or say something negative about the commander-in-chief, who happens to be the President of the United States, or even their commanding officers or their superiors, because if they do, those are punishable under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So there's a separate set of rules that govern the military for specific reasons to discipline, to adhere to unity, and to adhere to the proposal or the process of achieving the national objective or strategic objective. Now, in reference to going back to the judicial judge in California, I do not see any constitutional authority where a federal judge at any district level has any say-so over how the military should or should not be run, because that's not the way it's set up.
Well, Justice Department Attorney Paul G. Freeburn argued that exact point that you just made, that Congress, not a federal court, should have the authority and responsibility to enact military policy.
Exactly.
He says that the sole evidence presented by the Justice Department and the legislative history of the ban, which, government lawyers, they argue that the case was properly adopted by Congress through a deliberative and reasoned political process. So that just validates exactly what you just said. And when I saw this, a federal judge in Riverside, California, by what authority can he direct military policy? And is that not a dangerous precedent if the Obama administration bends to this?
Exactly, and that's my biggest concern whenever you let a federal judge do that, is because we have a significant history of what we call legislation from the bench, where federal legislatures, or I should say judicial legislature, are making legislation from the bench based upon their ruling. Setting a precedent up like this is automatically going to determine, well, then we are no longer, our military system is no longer under the role of Congress, or under the President of the United States, or under the Secretary of the Defense, or the Secretary of the Air Force, or all these people who have been appointed and approved by our senators. We're now saying some local federal judge can go ahead and make policy on the United States, and that is not true. And if we don't nip this in the bud now, just in that one incident, whether we agree or disagree with the ruling, is that we need to reestablish the constitutional role of our government, and that is to go by the Constitution. That federal judges do not have that authority to do that with our military personnel.
It almost looks as if judicially and constitutionally we are a nation in chaos. The argument is not whether gays should or should not be allowed to enlist in the military and allowed to serve, but it seems to me the argument is, why are we taking away from Congress and the Constitution the right to make that decision?
You're right on target, and we're letting it happen. That's just it. And we've let it happen not only with this issue, but many other issues, whether they had to do with military issues or with other issues that had nothing to do with in reference to interstate commerce or whatever it may be. We've allowed the federal judicial branch to start making policy and legislating from the bench that they have no constitutional authority to do so. From that perspective. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Do you see any problems with disciplinary problems that could emanate from this?
Well, you got to go back into history a little bit. We're looking at appeal or repeal the last don't tell rule, and Mike pretty much nailed it on the head. I think we share the same opinion personally, and that is that if a person's going to what they choose to do with their own personal life and reference to their own sexual orientation is irrelevant to me. Okay. At the same time, I do not believe we should be making such a significant issue in reference to whether they are or they're not gay. And you give a good example of of your family member who served, did very well and honorably. And I know people who are, you know, homosexual or bisexual in the service who are excellent, troops. But besides that, from that concept, it was never made a significant issue to bring it out and say, okay, now we want this equal protection of my ability to my freedom of speech, to my due process, to my ability to go ahead and say that this is me and I shouldn't have to do that. Well, it goes back to what I originally said about freedom of speech. When you voluntarily enlist in the military, you're technically volunteering, giving up a lot of your rights, and one of those happens to be the freedom of speech. So some judge ended up saying, well, you're violating the freedom of speech. No, I voluntarily gave that up so that I could defend my nation, and that I could go ahead and carry out whatever's needed in my by the President of the United States in our national interest. So.
Hey, I'm sorry, Cass. We got a caller on the line. Calling from 630. Do you got a question or comment for Cass? Hello, caller. Okay, sorry to interrupt you, Cass. They're on the line.
That's all right. I was hoping they'd call through. And like you said, Mike, it's going to be a very hot issue because it's like illegal immigration. It's like abortion. Anything that we're talking about, social behavior. It's going to create that kind of concept, saying, well, no, I don't like people telling me what I should and should not be able to do. Well, you're right, but when you're in the military, it's a totally different concept. And I was talking to somebody the other day in reference to about morale and in reference to that and and equality and how it should be addressed. If we looked at it from another perspective, and that is just take, for instance, when you're in basic training or wherever you may be, depending on how it goes, is that you have open showers. Okay. And if somebody's openly, gay and in the showers there, and then all of a sudden, he looks over or she looks over, or I say he because it's probably more visible with a he, and then end up getting an erection, and everybody turns around looking at him, and you say, okay, what the heck is this all about? How's that individual going to feel?
That's a valid point. It's like putting men and women in the showers together.
Exactly.
It's a very valid point.
So if we substitute and take the male out and put a female in there, and then all the other guys got the erection, and the female was sitting there looking at all these guys, so how is she supposed to feel? If you're talking about equality, and all of a sudden we say, oh, hold on, but you can be gay, but you cannot express you're gay in the shower, whether that's biological or not biological.
Well, it's like you said, my Uncle Jesse, and I think everyone that was in the Army is my Uncle Jesse. I mean, you cannot look at him and know he wasn't gay because he was a very effeminate-looking gay who was very tough. I mean, a Jewish gay man serving in Germany in World War II with all kinds of tattoos. I mean, that's an anomaly right there. But Uncle Jesse didn't have any problem, and men that fought with him and knew he was gay were proud to stand by him and say they fought with him. So, to me, the don't ask, don't tell policy is not such a bad thing. But just to say that, 69% of Americans support allowing gays and lesbians to serve in the military. However, it's going to take an act of Congress, the way I see it, and not a federal judge.
Well, and that's exactly how it should be. As a matter of fact, that's what Obama's presenting right now, is asking that same federal judge, forgot what her name was. I was reading, I think it's Blevins. But anyway, he's asking for a stay of execution on the ruling because they're taking a step back and saying, hey, look, although you're trying to mandate, the military, what they should and shouldn't do, there's a process that's got to go into place. We're going to end up having to go through a transitional training process of getting them education and some awareness out for these troops, and you just go throw the blanket policy out like you're trying to say. It's just like pretend like the policy wasn't there, and people are going to do what they want to do anyway and prosecute them and have your blanket parties and everything else that used to happen before that, which kind of caused the don't ask, don't tell policy to go into place. Was whenever the death of the individual who ended up getting the blanket party caused the individual the don't ask, don't tell policy. And actually, that's the way I kind of look at don't ask, don't tell policy. It was basically was tying the commander's hands and tying the individual's hands from not prosecuting people who they could have thought were gay. Not saying that it still didn't go away, but it protected them to a great degree. Getting rid of it and then all of a sudden, but now you can go and keep them in, does not mean that that the issues are still not going to go away of people being uncomfortable with some people who are homosexual.
Well, you touched on a point that I thought was very interesting. Rights in the military are different than rights in civil society. And in regard to that, would gays in the military feel that they should be given special rights? And that, again, would create, as I see, chaos inside of the military structure.
And it set the precedence then because, and this is where I would, from a legislative perspective, as a senator of the United States, and this is where I would probably put my foot down, is that, say, what people choose to do with their own lives is up to them. I'm not.
But I don't know if I'd ever go so far as stick rock cocaine up my butt.
Well, I could tell you some other stories about what's gone up people's backside, so to speak.
But, that was a good clip, Mike. That was a good show. It really was. Well, Cass, you were talking about history of gays in the military, and I found that very interesting, too, because the U.S. military explicitly prohibited homosexuality in the Articles of War of 1916, but a ban wasn't enforced until World War II. Of course, my uncle got through the cracks and did that, but another concern I might have would be when you go into these very rigid Muslim countries that are governed by Sharia law, would our gay soldiers, would they be more at a risk than our heterosexual soldiers, and would that create a problem with having to protect your own men from a specific situation? Could that have an effect?
Well, actually, that's a very good point, and unfortunately, we get to the point that the argument is that, well, there's no scientific empirical evidence studies that show that it wouldn't. Okay, now there are studies out there that I read that say that well, the military can adjust and the military can do these things, and I'm not saying they can't. I mean, the military is probably the finest people, the men and women in our world who are able to do that. But to answer your question is, one, all right, yes, it could create a problem. Two, has been noted, me personally, by being stationed in the desert, is that some of those individuals do practice of that culture, I should say, practice gay or homosexual sex, I should say. And then also kind of goes back to the third thing that I encountered in being deployed in the desert was whenever I had a female staff sergeant, and she was going to confront people of of that culture, the Middle Eastern culture. They did not respect her because she was a woman. Okay, so you have all these cultural conflicts that are going to happen within that culture, and that is just one of those things that would have to be considered.
So there just are many areas. It's not just a matter of saying. It's not a matter of an individual saying, "I have." The way I'm looking at it is someone saying, "I have the right to do what I want." To an extent, you have the right to do what you want, but you don't have the right to do what you want if it interferes with the safety of the group you're in, of the safety of defending the country. And could that be an issue?
Well, that is most definitely could be an issue. It's just kind of like somebody who gets drunk and stupid and starts trying to fight with the local nationals. He or she's going to say, "Oh, I got a right to do what I want." No, you don't have a right to do what you want. You just put the rest of the crew in danger. Not to mention our diplomatic relations with the nation that we're trying to get us to support our diplomacy and our strategic plans here. So you just don't, in the military, you don't have, I guess, and maybe this is where I was kind of inducted, is that you really don't have the rights you think you do have, that you have on the outside.
It's not a democracy, is it?
No, it's not a democracy. It's not intended to be a democracy. I mean, that's why you have officers and you have enlisted, and you have, although they're trying to go to this one uniform kind of club instead of a enlisted club and an officers club, now they're having a combined club, but they still say, but yet, this is officers where they go and this was enlisted they go. There's still a separation of a lot of traditions in reference to that, to maintain some sense of, tradition and adherence to unity and cohesion. So no, you don't have those.
Here's an article. Here's an interesting note here that in World War II, I don't know how Uncle Jesse got through this, but anyway, they were actually screened for feminine body characteristics effeminacy in dress and manner. And I've got, please don't send me hate mail, but it goes back to the rock cocaine at my butt, an expanded rectum. I'm sorry, but if you're sticking rock cocaine up your butt, you could still have that anyway.
Yeah, but the rock cocaine up the butt is actually just trying to import drugs in the United States.
I know. I just had to say that.
Yeah,
but what I like,
I mean, it's more or less you're talking about. You're talking cue balls, you're talking gerbils, you're talking vacuum cleaners. You can go on some of the stuff that sap and reference.
Well,
hamsters.
A former Iraqi war veteran discharged in July for being openly gay. He returned to New York City recruiting stations on Wednesday to reenlist in the Army.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard about that. There was a Choi too that also got. I think he was a lieutenant colonel or something that went ahead and got admitted back into the service because of that. And it goes back to there's also another component here that I'll put my boots on the ground on this one, and that is that we're under this strong concept that there's a social equality that has to happen in our nation, and the reality is there is really no guarantees in our U.S. Constitution about social equality. Those qualities are inalienable rights that we have in reference to race, we have to sex, we have to gender, and religion and stuff like that. But when we get into to these other areas, there's no such thing as that we have equality, because when you look at it, in the United States, or in our world, we are not all created equal.
No, we're we're not all created equal.
And the thing is, though, we're not all created equal, and nor are we all going to be treated equally. And I think that the concept of that we're trying to achieve that, is creating more social conflict and turmoil within our moral character as a nation of what we used to stand for. And I'm going to go back to our Judeo-Christian foundation. We're having little instances like this happen is getting away from our strong belief in God and what He represents in our Constitution and in our country. And I think this repealing it is just going to hurt our country more than it's going to help us, because we're once again losing our moral character as a nation. And we can say all we want about, well, we're the land of the free and we're the land about equality. Well, yes, we're the land about equal opportunity. But there's no guarantees that you're going to be treated equal or that you're going to also have equal access. You're going to have to work for those things. That's just like what capitalism is based upon. You're not guaranteed to be a millionaire. You have to go work your way to be a millionaire. You have to either get the education or you're going to have to hustle your butt.
Well, now Senator McCain, who has a wonderful military record, he certainly is a war hero. This is why he walks like he does. People say, well, he walks like an old man. He was walking like that when he came back from Vietnam because he had been beaten so severely and had so many bones broken. Now, he is against gays in the militaries. I'm looking here. It says that's a con. He does not support it.
Yeah, he's one of the senators that kind of looked at it and when they're trying to tack on the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy bill onto the floor of the defense budget. He's the one that set up a filibuster to try to put that off tonight to get passed, because he feels that same concept of right now what's in place has been working. Yes, there have been, and if I look here, there have been a total of about maybe there have been a total of 13,000 people who have been discharged from the United States military since 1994 up to today, 2009. Comparing that we have over, gosh almighty, 1 million people in the military, that is a very, very, very small number. But yet we're making it a very big issue within our social society and within the culture of our military right now. Like I said, I don't have any problem with people serving in the military or gay. They just keep to themselves, do what they want to do, whatever they do behind closed doors, because believe it or not, that's even one of the things we talk about the UCMJ is that you can get prosecuted, get a federal prosecution for adultery. Where else is that going to happen in the civilian sector? if you get a DWI and you get prosecuted in the military court system, you're talking about a felony.
Yes, it is. The military court system is entirely different. And it seems to me what we're saying here is, okay, as a minority group, you have specific rights. However, again, what Cass is saying is when you go into the military, you voluntarily give up those rights, and you must abide by what the military says. And it takes an act of Congress to change what those rights and responsibilities in the military are, and I would understand it to be. And it just boggles my mind to think that we're allowing a federal judge. And I'm wondering if there isn't something under the table, because Mr. Obama is very pro this, and is there some way under the table that he's perhaps influencing these federal judges to get what he wants? I would hope that Congress would not allow this to occur.
Well, unfortunately, he is the commander-in-chief, and he's, actually, we go back to President Clinton, when he wrote the DOD directive, because he was actually trying to ban Reagan's Act, which pretty much said, homosexuality is incompatible with military service and will be discharged, period. And then, of course, that created, some turmoil here and there. And then eventually when Clinton got elected, he was trying to push a complete ban of that process. But unfortunately, he was not able to push his agenda through, so he had to negotiate the Don't Ask, Don't Tell rule, because Congress circumvented him and passed their own legislation in reference to that. And that's when he, as the commander-in-chief, went ahead and exercised his executive authority as the commander-in-chief to implement the Don't Ask, Don't Tell, Don't Harass, and Don't Pursue policies of that program. So the president, you can take a look and say, well, what is his real motive? Well, I honestly think the motive is really, if you can get this through, you set precedents that the judicial court system can now rule over the military and govern the military, which is
and
not...
invalidate the Constitution to some
Exactly.
extent. Well, both Mr. Gates and Admiral Mullen, they stress the need for a slow process that gets it right and protects our forces, in fighting wars. And Mr. Gates has promised that the Pentagon's working group will reach out to, this force, service members and their families, to try to, best understand the potential impact of this change in policy. He doesn't want to just rush into anything. And what I'm hearing from you is that it really needs more study.
It needs a lot more study, not subjective study. We can do a lot of research analysis. We can do a lot of empirical research, and we can do a lot of scientific research. But all scientific research is going to be opinionated based upon our modes or models that we choose to use to that research, or based upon our value system, how we interpret that data. As much as we want to be objective about analyzing the data, it's going to favor pretty much what we're wanting to see through our own rose-colored glasses, so to speak. So the approach is, if you're really thinking seriously about appealing it, it's not something that, one, should be done in the court system. Two, it should be done within a perspective that individuals in the United States military are not going to be and blatantly abused or murdered or assaulted, because that's the pendulum can swing the other way. Because the civilian sector society says 58% may support people who serve in the military. Great, but most of them probably didn't serve in the military and understand what happens in there. So you can't just quite count on that as being your own study, your own statistic to support a reason to ban a law or to repeal a law. And actually, Gates' study should be out December 1st in reference to that panel they put together to see, they're interviewing 400,000 service members to get their perspective on this as well.
Well, it seems like what you're saying is it almost supersedes the rights of some social groups to say, this is what I want to do, you have to allow me to do it, because what I'm seeing is that Mr. Obama doesn't really care about one way or another gays in the military. He's interested in setting precedents that will allow him to come in and take more control. So I don't see him as really having any feeling one way or the other on the issue, but having the feeling of setting a precedent to expand his control. And what the hell is Lady Gaga doing on this? I mean, who cares what Lady Gaga says or what she does? I mean, who the hell cares about her anyway, except Harry Reid's got this thing going with her, which says something for both of them. But, she was actually polling the Senate and said she was really out there pushing, and that the gay rights advocates fell 4 votes short this afternoon in a Senate vote. Now, what does the Senate have to do with this, Cass? What does the Senate have to do with this policy?
Well, the Senate, along with the House of Representatives, are the ones that end up having to look at the congressional action or the passing of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, because they're the ones that would end up having to amend those laws that appeal specifically to the manuals of court-martial or the Uniform Code of Military Justice, whether we do that through public law or through the USC Code. That's the role that they play in reference to from the senatorial perspective. You're talking about the Senate Armed Forces Committee is the one that's going to end up actually looking at this, because a lot of these military functions are falling under the Armed Forces Committee, Senate Armed Forces Committee. They're the ones that are going to end up having to look into this and provide the direction that needs to happen in reference to this policy. And I think people are, and I'm kind of looking back, maybe call me naive or call me common sense, but if you appeal or repeal this policy, what are you repealing it to? It's going to have to go to the previous law that was in place, and that goes right back to the Reagan Act, which specifically states that gays are not allowed in the military. Because a judge can say you got to do this. Well, no, the judge says that this is unconstitutional, and that would have to go all the way up to the Supreme Court to make that decision. But that does not say you do not make policy. It's got to go back to previous policy, and that policy is the Reagan Act that he passed. Says it's incompatible. So appeal it. Okay, great. We'll kick you out then.
So you're saying that the Senate is just exercising its natural role. The House writes the legislation, and the Senate passes it and passes it into law.
Exactly. They're the ones that would end up taking a look at it. They would say, okay, well, here's what we need to do. And actually, this is what needs to happen is Congress is the one that needs to act on this, and they need to act on it before the president tries to act on this.
We can see if we have a Republican House and we fall a seat short in the Senate, we could still be seeing some roadblocks here in regard to legislation.
Yes, that will create some of the concern. I know we're looking at either a 7 or 11 switch in the Senate, but I think it's more probably going to be possibly a 7-seat switch, which kind of evens things out a little bit. But then you look back to the Clinton administration. He wanted to pass this policy, but he couldn't do it, so he had to negotiate. And if they're really adamant, the president's really adamant of trying to repeal this, then he's going to have to negotiate something.
This goes back to what you said. When they repeal it, then what does it go back to? Because since the House has already approved repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, but the Senate was 56-43, so they weren't allowed. So they weren't allowed to pass that. But again, it goes back to what you said. They've already approved it, but approved it to what? To go back to not to allow them?
Well, it goes back to basically what I call Reagan's Defense Directive 1332-14, which specifically says homosexuality is incompatible with military services, and persons who engage in homosexual actions or stated that they are homosexual or bisexual were discharged. And that's under the Uniform Code of Military Justice.
And again, I think people seem to confuse the military as being part of a democratic society and that you have the right to go into the military and to do what you choose, but you do not have that right in the military, and that's why. And I think that's needed. Is that not for a strong defense?
Yeah, you need those rules.
The government owns your ass.
Yeah, it literally really does. And
literally.
Literally, you're absolutely. I mean, I couldn't put a bumper sticker on my car or something if in an election year saying I'm supporting a specific candidate, because then it may seem that the military is supporting or the Air Force is supporting this specific candidate. It goes back to when my dad was running for county commissioner, and I was trying to help him out with his campaign. Say, well, hold on, you got to be careful not to be crossing the line here, where you may be representing the United States Air Force. And I'm thinking, hey, look, this is my dad. I'm trying to get him elected. So,
what you're saying too is a moral throwback to a certain extent. If you have no belief in a higher power, of being outside of yourself with a strict set of, well, not strict, but a moral coding for society, and then your belief goes into a dependent society, and you are dependent upon the judges and governmental authorities, and then we're just having chaos everywhere because one judge does this and one judge does that. And if you don't have any higher beliefs, then your beliefs are going to have to change every time somebody makes a decision.
Exactly, and that was one of the things that Alexander de Tocqueville specifically stated. He says, the ability for the United States to have its Constitution into place and the ability for the judicial system, as well as not having a centralized administration, it ensures that the people will continue to self-govern themselves without the influence of a tyranny of a government. And that was driven by our moral character or our social moral character, what we believed in. I have some grave concerns in reference to, we're really getting away from our social moral character as a nation and what we stand for on Christian beliefs, Judeo-Christian beliefs, and going more to a more, let's just let man's law decide versus God's law. Let's just let that judge down in California decide what's going to happen or what shouldn't happen with our lives. And I think we've gotten so accustomed to it throughout our nation is that we assume that whenever a judge makes a ruling, well, it's law, therefore we have to go ahead and do it. And, I look at the Constitution, I'm trying to say, okay, where does it specifically say that whenever this judge down in California makes a ruling that it affects every other law in the United States? When did they have the authority?
Absolutely. And a man is a finite being. Man's going to die. So when man dies, another man takes over, and another law comes, and another law comes. Mm-hmm. And I see this, if what you're saying is correct, as disturbing the cohesiveness of society.
It's society, and that's one of the things that I liked about Reagan was that he brought our nation together under a certain concept, a certain moral belief that we'd already lost our identity, we lost our willingness in our military, we lost our moral character as conservatives and what we believe in as a nation, doing the right thing for right people, that we didn't need so many governmental regulations telling us what we should and shouldn't do. We've completely gone the opposite direction now. Please, government, tell me what should I do. Oh, I don't like you. Let me go sue you so I can tell somebody, so I can get my money. We just completely run to the government for all the answers and gotten away from our Christian morality of what is or isn't right.
It's just a Pentagon
to answer
survey.
your question about the judges, if something's tried in the Supreme Court in California, it doesn't actually apply to the other 49 states, but if that same case comes up in those states, they'll go by what that judge said, but they can still have the trial over again.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of look at it from the perspective is they want to go back to another case hearing that says that, specifically that, okay, well, based upon the California court hearing of the log cabin Republicans against the Air Force and military, that they ruled that they had that authority to do so. Well, if that's the case, then you can easily go back to the Supreme Court ruling that said that the act itself of banning gays is constitutional, and that was the United States Supreme Court that ruled on that.
Cass, it goes back to exactly what you were saying about the executive order, because it says the Pentagon's been serving as 400,000 uniformed members of the military for their views on changing the policy. But Senator McCain is convinced that the deck is being stacked against it, has already been stacked against it, and that Mr. Obama continues to stack against it in favor of doing away with Don't Ask, Don't Tell, because as currently written, this measure leaves a decision on repealing the policy to the President, Secretary of Defense, and Admiral Mike Mullen. So again, what this is doing is setting a precedent for the President, and I don't think he has any concern for gays whatsoever. I think he's narcissistic and has concern for himself, is that if it sets a precedent, it will allow him greater authority.
You're absolutely right, because what will happen, the same thing that happened to President Clinton. You had the Reagan directive that I talked about. Well, then all of a sudden, President Clinton was trying to pass his policy, but Congress went ahead and circumvented it, and they passed an act. They didn't pass policy, they passed an act or a law, public law, and therefore his hands were tied. So what he did is he just modified that law to some degree with his own directive. If you appeal this and get rid of it, then it enhances the President of the United States to create now his own directive on what he thinks our position should be with the homosexuals in the military.
What I'm concerned with Mr. Obama is, as Senator McCain says, he's accused Obama of engaging, in a cynical act for political reasons as the election nears. But I fear with Mr. Obama, if he continues to set these precedents, this may be the last president we have. if he continues to set these precedents, I'm concerned with free elections in the future. And that's why it's so important to put you in the Senate.
Well, and I hear and I actually feel your concern, and that's probably why I'm jumping into the doggone race is because that's a fear I have as well, and a lot of actually people have that same fear, and that's why you have a big movement with the Tea Party, and that's why it's important for them to knock down the Tea Party, and it's important for them to knock down certain organizations or certain, because they're trying to get back their constitutional rights. But the only thing I strongly recommend is that now is the time. I mean, especially with the November elections coming around the corner, now is the time for every American that's registered to vote to go and exercise their constitutional right to vote.
Well, this is so important here because we're really at a crossroads, and if we kept setting these precedents, in 2 years there may not be a presidency anymore, and that totally and completely frightens me. And it's time we really need to take this country back. And if people don't stand up, wake up and listen. I mean, this administration, I hear nothing about, well, we're going to run on our record. We have this success and that success. It's all about how somebody hates somebody else. Somebody hates somebody else. This has been the most divisive president in history in regard to racial attitudes. And their message is always it's somebody else's fault. I'm not the fault. It's somebody else's fault. There's nothing positive coming out of it.
Well, and that's a good point. And the big thing is that I would even have shifted the focus is saying it's not just taking our country back from the federal government. And we visualize the federal government as being the Congress and the Senate, but it's taking our country back from the most lethal fourth legislative branch, and that is the bureaucracy that we have created by empowering them to make public policy without representation.
This is exactly what's going on. He's allowing national policies to be made without representation because an executive order does exactly that. There's no representation. There's no input. It's an executive order. So that's such a good point you make because that effectively says, we are going to dictate to you. We are not going to allow you to have any input because what were they saying now with McDonald's and the food? We need a benevolent overseer because parents just aren't capable of making the right decisions for their children for the food they eat. I mean, Michelle Obama wants tofu in the schools, but she's gorging on caviar in Spain.
Yeah, and the other one is cap and trade because he knows it's going to get shot down. So what is he going to do? He's going to try to manipulate it through the Environmental Protection Agency, which he's the head of. And the Environmental Protection Agency is a bureaucracy, and he's able to go ahead and write executive orders to dictate policy on what the EPA should or shouldn't do, and then he circumvents the system of legislation without representation, because he's going to use the fact that I got elected, so I am representing the people, but he doesn't let the other check.
Stuff.
I'm sorry.
I see him.
I knew he was going to pull that stuff before he even got in office. I can tell by his attitude.
The president's more of a servant of the people. He's more, the Congress and the Senate, the people elect you to preside over this, and the Congress and the Senate set the laws, and you, as the president, are the servant of the people to abide by this.
Obama just thinks he knows best, and that's all there is to it. Where most presidents listen to their advisors, their cabinet staff, and all that, he knows best. He don't want to hear shit from anybody else, and he's going to do what he wants. And I knew that before he got into office. That's what I was online on worldwide sites campaigning for McCain just because I didn't want Obama in office. And I know what kind of resistance I ran up against because he basically had them brainwashed with his cell phone-like commercials, and everybody just thought he was a great guy. And like I wouldn't mind sitting down and having a beer with the guy. He seems cool like that. But I wouldn't want him running my company or my business. I wouldn't want to work for him. And I didn't want to be in president of this country because I knew he was going to operate it with this dismissive attitude, not listen to anybody else, and he knows what's best, and he's going to do what he wants, however he wants to do it. And that's all there is to it. And he puts his foot down, and that's it. And you know what? He's the president, so now we can't do shit about it until 2012.
Well, and we can't do anything about it because he has a legislature that supports him. Because the checks and balances of the system was the House of Representatives and the United States Senate. that was the checks and balances. But whenever they start supporting him and empowering him with the legislation, then there's no checks and balances. He's almost an anarchist or not he, but the position becomes an anarchist to where he can do whatever he wants. All he has to do is just sign into law whatever he wants, and this is why these elections are so important. Is if you really want true representation, you really want no checks and balance system, you really have to vote Republican straight ticket on every seat that's open and take back the House and take back the Senate. So then all of a sudden he says, well, guess what? That Clean Air Bill Act that you're trying not to pass, or you know what you're trying to do? Well, we can write a law and then we're going to pass it. And they say, well, you don't have enough people to go ahead and override my veto. Well, guess what? We do control the budget. We control the money to every bureaucratic agency that you monitor. We're going to cut their budget.
Yeah, and you just can't constipate the government until the 2012. Basically, remember the day the government shut down? Yeah, you just constipate things until so they can't do nothing until Obama's out of there.
Well, this is, I think, the first time we ever didn't pass a resolution to run the government.
So.
But anyway,
I see President Obama, Mr. Obama. I see Mr. Obama as being a threat to national security, a threat to our defense, and a threat to the structure of our very society.
We still have all that stuff to worry about in Iran and Iraq, and mostly Iran right now, and all that stuff over there to worry about.
And now we're finding out that the president wants to sit down with the Taliban in discussions.
That might not be a bad thing.
Well, I don't. If we legitimize that terrorist group, then we would have to legitimize every other terrorist group.
Well, yeah, and that's actually the what should I say, the arts of diplomacy, and whether you should or shouldn't sit down with somebody, because it's whether you do or do not symbolize their legitimacy.
Has a point as well.
But I think that's where the Pakistanis. I'm sorry.
I said Dolly does have a point. I said the solution is just send Jimmy Carter over there again.
Oh my God! I think that man. There's something wrong. I honestly think I think he's mentally challenged. I think he's mentally deficient. There is something wrong with him.
So maybe we can send Clinton.
But
I agree with not legitimizing or validating their existence, their presidents, and stuff like that. I do agree with you there, but I also kind of think that the more we know about them, the more we know what to do with them. So I don't know.
Well, I think
it's a touchy subject no matter how you look at it.
I hope, Cass, that you listen on Friday night, because Mike and I are going to have Larry Ballard on. And he told me today that Carter's not the idiot I think he is. He said there was a predetermined plan with Carter, and he set things into motion, that he set precedents. And I thought, whoa, this is very interesting. So I thought, well, I hope Cass listens in on Friday, and and we'll see what Larry Ballard has to say about some specific issues as this.
Should I know who Larry Ballard is?
Pardon me?
Should I know who Larry Ballard is? Because I just heard of him today when you sent me the link.
Well, he's got Larry Ballard has written a book, and he is talking about how there is a plan here, and that Carter was not the idiot, that Carter actually had a plan in mind, and he did set precedents, and he says that you need to understand Washington's hidden agenda to fight back in November. And a lot of what he's saying is coordinating with what Cass is saying. The two factions that are, potentially capable of destroying the American society as we know it today.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, is Larry Ballard kind of like Alex Jones, where everything's this big trumped-up conspiracy, by the what do you call that, the Illuminati, and we have shifters among us and all this stuff, or?
No, I don't think so. He's more or less an historian, that discusses, different presidents and what they have done and what they've done in history. And his book out is Modern Slavery.
Well, look on Amazon. I didn't.
And the Fight for Freedom.
But let's get back to Cass. We only got like 5 minutes left. So.
All right. And actually, I wouldn't discount the Illuminati anyway, by the way.
Very interesting.
Yeah, we see Alex Jones. Alex Jones is the boy who cried wolf, because if he is right about anything that he has to say, after he blew up my Twitter, after he blew up my Facebook about this nonsense constantly, I had to boot him off my Twitter. I couldn't see nothing anybody else said because Alex Jones writing 300 freaking tweets in a row, writing a book on Twitter. And if the guy ever does actually have something to say, nobody's going to listen to him. If he is ever right about anything. I mean, I've read these tweets about blimps following people home and reading their license plates. I don't. It might be true, but like I said, if anything is true, this guy says nobody's going to listen to him.
Hmm.
That's
how
it
sounds like Ross Perot in the 1992 election when he dropped out. You know, said the FBI agents that were kind of, you know.
Ross Perot made some points, but he was so out there for the society of the time that those points could not be seen.
Mm. Yeah, which is very interesting because he was ahead in the polls. He would have probably been the president of the United States in 1992, and I don't know whether how much of an impact that would have had on the establishment. Somebody who was
our economy would be great right now if Ross Perot was ever president. The rest of the stuff, we'd still be fixing it.
Yeah. I don't think he let. I think he would not rule.
Fix it. We wouldn't have this deficit we have now and these bailouts and all this other stuff.
Well, no, this is something that needs to be addressed too. The debts and the bailout. How is this affecting our society? I mean, is this having more of an impact than just debt?
Yeah, people are afraid to spend money. Businesses and people in general.
Yeah, that's probably a whole hour in itself discussing that baby.
And how does that affect the military? How does that affect the military, Cass? Because I have a friend that actually had to send his children items they needed because the U.S. government couldn't provide them.
And the U.S. government meaning military people?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, I know there's a concept. People say, well, the military people make a lot of money. You make a lot of money. Well, I'm going to tell you
they don't.
One, they sacrifice, like I said, their rights voluntarily, and then they really end up. I mean, there's some positive and negatives in reference to the military, but they really don't make the kind of money people really think they make compared to everything that they end up having to encounter. And I think studies have even shown that what they're paying somebody in the military to do, they're doubling it on the outside, especially with our civil service agencies, who are doing some of that. But the debt in itself, it's impacting every piece of our federal legislature in reference to appropriated funding, to entitlements, to how much money we're going to have to borrow. I think I was reading the other day, the debt ceiling is going to have to be voted again next year. The beginning part of next year, which is basically saying, well, should we increase the debt limit to borrow more money? And if we do, then that means our dollar is going to get weaker. And if our dollar gets weaker, then our economy isn't that great. Or if we don't, then people are going to say, well, we can't trust the United States government because they have too much debt and they can't pay it. And it goes back to fiscal conservative having to cut budgets and increase revenue and how you do that.
Well, Cass, speaking of money, how can people contribute to the Cass for Senate campaign?
That's right there, Cass for Senate, CASFORSENATE.com. Just click on that donations budget button and just make your contribution. Or if you want to mail it in, you can send it to P.O. Box 3363, Early, Texas, 76803.
And you do not have to be a Texan to donate.
No. You do have to be a U.S. citizen, though.
Yes, a U.S. citizen, a legal U.S. citizen, but you don't have to be a Texan. I think some people think if they aren't from Texas, well, what does that affect me? Well, the Senate especially affects you from Texas, from anywhere. So,
well, I appreciate it.
Anywhere in the United States,
thank you,
legal
Cass.
United States.
It's been great. Stick around for a minute. We're just signing off for the last cast, and just stick around for a second. And
will do.
Great job, guys, by the way. Excellent show.
Thanks, Dolly.
Thank you, Cass.
All right. Yeah, that was pretty good. That was actually a really excellent show, guys. Thank you.
Thanks. So yeah, I'm glad you kind of chimed in there and voiced your
Absolutely.
opinion.
And this is an important issue of gays in the military because it goes beyond gays in the military. It sets a precedent for U.S. policy and the entire structure of our government in the future.
Now, Mike, we're not recording now, are we?
Oh, okay. We're not streaming, so people can't hear us live. But yes, we're still being recorded for podcast. Whereas if you go download it later on, you can still hear the continuation. We just signed off live stream.
Yeah, because I think once I was gonna publish it, but it had all the extra commentary. I said, well, I don't think people want to hear that.
Well, you can say whatever you want to. I mean, you're running for Senate, but I mean, keep that in mind. But outside that, you can say whatever you want. I mean,
no, but you're absolutely right, Dolly.
Or whatever.
In reference to the precedents, that's gosh almighty. I just kind of saying, is nobody thinking in Washington or what? I mean, the president himself will say, okay, whatever. I don't have to listen to you.
To me, it's scary. I see us going down 1930s path in Germany, where all of these issues are being brought to the forefront. Is I'm going to give you these rights. You want these rights, but they're saying that what's happening. It's not that these groups are being granted rights. These groups are circumvented to the president's desire to have complete power and authority. And I'm concerned in 2012 we may no longer have a presidency if this continues to move forward.
How could that happen, though?
How could what happen?
That there's no more presidency.
Well, it's not. Actually, there will be a president. It's just not going to be, I think, a president like of the United States where he has the authority under the Constitution. He's going to be more of a czar or a king.
An international representative for the United States.
Yeah, who's got more authority than the Congress.
Like a prime minister?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, yeah, but even with even more authority because he's the way we have been really brutalizing the Constitution in the past 30 years is 40 years now. Go back to the 1960s. 50 years. Oh gosh almighty. But anyway, we have pretty much empowered this one executive branch with more power than what was intended by our framers. It was not intended for the House of Representatives to pass legislation and then say, okay, here, Mr. President or executive, whoever's the president at the time, go ahead and do what you got to do to implement this policy and make whatever rules. And then they created all these bureaucracies and all these agencies who end up making policy. And that's one thing I was reading in the 1960s. We had the Woodson conference was at Syracuse, New York, which a bunch of public administrators, young public administrators, got together and said, you know what, if the legislature is not going to deal, or the executive is not going to deal with the social issues of racism or poverty or any other social issues that we see, if they're not going to deal with it, then we'll do it ourselves and we'll start making policy. And that's exactly what's been happening. Public administrators have positioned themselves in bureaucratic positions to make policy.
Such as a federal judge in Riverside, California. It looks like it's only relating to California, but he actually is almost in a position to create policy for the military by being in a prominent enough position that everyone else is paying attention to this. So,
well, the big one was the female judge who ended up specifically stating out of San Francisco, who ruled on the log cabins Republicans versus the Department of Defense, when she specifically says, you will stop kicking people out of the military, and she told this to the Department of Defense, you will stop kicking people out of the military, and you will start letting gays serve in your military. I mean, straight to DOD, she said that, based on her ruling on October the 12th.
I just think that as far as gays being in the military, it shouldn't be an issue unless, what you discussed, that scenario in the showers. I think that's unlikely, but if that happened, then we got a problem. And deal with the problem, the individual isolated problem. Not everything has to be a policy change.
No, it doesn't. And I mean, that's why, to some great degree, this policy that's in place is protecting that from happening. So if somebody does have, an erection in the goddamn shower, Well, okay, he has an erection in sorrow. I don't know if he's gay or not. He may be missing his girlfriend or something or whatever, you know. But as it is now, I say, well, hold, he might be gay because we let all the gays in, you know.
Well, okay, like same scenario, but the guy's looking you up and down. Then,
Okay.
then you got a problem, right? Yeah, because I mean,
well, I was in New Orleans once
for no reason sometimes.
I was in New Orleans at a conference once, and I was down on Bourbon Street someplace, and I walked into a club. I guess it was a club. Anyways, walked in there, and I went to go use the restroom, and I'm standing there, and some other guy comes in, and I'm there to take care of my business, and he pulls him in the next stall next to me, and now he just starts going up and down, and then he tries to talk to me in Spanish, and I'm like, all right. I'm out of here.
That's like my speaking to someone in French. I can read it and write it, but you start talking it to me again, and you're lost. I'm lost.
Oh,
man, I was at a bar one time, just this dive bar down the street, because my next door neighbor's like, the girl who works there, she's cute and she likes you, so I stopped in there, and I'm in the men's room, and they just had they had the 2 urinals and had the little petition in between it. Mm-hmm. And I'm wearing my, it was a brand new biker jacket, a Brooks leather jacket. I just got it, hadn't had a chance to break it in yet. So I looked like a wannabe biker, you know. So, you know, I'm standing there, you know, peeing, you know, this big burly, you know, seasoned professional biker, you know, comes in there and he's like, hey, man, you think you're tough? I was like, man, I'm just taking a piss and drinking, leave me alone. He's like, look, I want to show you something. I was like, man, no. He's like, no, just look over here. I want to show you something. I'm like, man, if you show me your penis, I'm going to punch you in the face. And he's like, no, man, it ain't like that. It ain't like that. Just look over here. And I looked over there, and he had a .38 pointed at me. And I just laughed at him in his face. And he goes, what, you think this is funny? I was like, yeah, I kind of think it's pretty funny, man, because as soon as I'm done peeing, I'm going to beat your ass unless you kill me. He puts the gun away. He goes, ha, ha, I just wanted to see whether you were a real biker or not. So,
okay.
But yeah, if that ever happens, man, I mean, yeah, if someone pulls a gun on you and you're peeing, I mean, what are you going to do? You know, but don't show fear, you know?
Well,
I
this is what I see Mr. Obama's doing, pulling a gun on us and expect to, and
while we're peeing.
Yes, while we're peeing, and we're all cowering. And believe me, when I saw that picture of him bent over kissing that Shake's ring, let me tell you, plenty of rock cocaine could be hidden in there.
Oh, no.
You know, I just have no respect for him, and he has no respect for the presidency. And when you see him, you know, when they're saluting the flag.
But I don't know if I'd ever go so far as stick rock cocaine up my butt.
Never gonna live that
You're
down.
never going to live that one down, Dolly.
when they're saluting the flag or the Pledge of Allegiance or whatever, and they're all standing there saluting, their hand over their heart. I mean, you watch Mr. Obama. He's doing the crotch salute. He's got his hands down in front of his crotch. He's not saluting. He's not putting his hand over his heart. This man does not love America. And that's why it's so important to get Cass in there, because he does.
That's respectable, man. It really is. Can we impeach him for that? There's got to be something we can do. Get Kenneth Starr on his side. No, Kenneth Starr's on their side. But, no, he's not. No, he's not. That's right.
We should outlaw the crotch salute.
Kenneth Starr still practice law?
I don't think he got banned, did he?
I don't think so.
I don't know. He might have retired by now or something, but I don't know.
But
we need to get Kenneth Starr, somebody like that, of Obama's butt. He stayed up Clinton's butt long enough. What's wrong with Obama?
Oh my God, poor Clinton got it from every angle. Although and I kind of liked him, but he's disgusting me lately the way he's coming out. You know, he's kind of bitter. And by the way, Hillary is now supporting an international handgun ban. So that goes back again to losing the presidency and being an international representative for the United States, but having more authority over the United States than a president would, because we are not we are not seeing any representation. You know, we're not allowed to vote for him. An international body votes for him, and then he does this for us. And Hillary's pushing an international handgun ban.
Yeah, that's the one I was talking about, where they're trying to override the U.S. Constitution and our Bill of Rights by passing the international or agreeing to that. And that's where I say the Senate comes into play, and that is that the Senate has to ratify any treaty or agreement that our president decides to go and engage in, and that's where we got to shoot it down. not ratify our agreement with that international treaty.
Absolutely. This is it. People have to take action against this international treaty on a handgun ban that Hillary Clinton is supporting. We have to take action against that because this is, in other words, we have no rights. There's going to be one person in control that has rights. We have no rights. As a country, it's like we don't exist anymore. Well, look at what happened to Europe when they went on the Euros. I mean, come on. Their economy's destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
And no one has a currency anymore.
Hey, isn't that kind of racist calling them euros?
Euros?
I heard that.
My goodness.
I heard it on TV the other day.
Ladies and gentlemen, I see it's 11 after 7, and I have a lot of work to do. So
that's right.
I'm going to have to go.
Wasn't that bad, was it? She still don't get it. Euros is money, not people.
What's that? I
see. You still didn't get it. It was a bad joke, but euros is money. It's not people.
Oh, okay. Okay, now I get it.
Do you get it now? What I said wasn't that kind of racist. But yeah, don't get me started on gun laws because I don't know if we've gone into it, Cass, but I've gone into it so many times I can't remember who's heard it and who's not. But the reason we have the Second Amendment is to back up the First. And the Second Amendment is not only for that, but is to protect ourselves from our government. If our government, if we ever need to do what we did back there in 1776 again, that's why we have those gun laws. I think you got into this.
Yeah.
We did get into this.
Yeah, it's actually on my platform.
This could be a nice show just on
like
this
our first
platform,
show.
Cass. But,
well, maybe we'll do Second Amendment next. Yeah, actually, that'd be good. You think, all right?
I do have to run because I have a lot of work to do and I got to get caught up.
Yeah, I gotta pick up my kids from catechism.
So anyway, what a good thing to do. I'm going to let y'all go. You guys sit here, and that'd be good to do just a show on the Second Amendment.
Yeah, we'll do that next week then.
Okay.
All right,
then I'll talk to you later, Mike and Cass, and y'all. Be good.
All right, we'll see you, Dolly.
All right, Cass.
I got to run.
See you later, Cass. All right, bye-bye.
All right, take care, Mike.
Thanks a lot, Cass.
Bye.